The holly green, the ivy green, the prettiest picture you've ever seen is Christmas in Killarney with all of the folks at home. It's nice to know to kiss your beau while cuddling under the mistletoe. And Santa Claus, you know, of course, is one of the boys from home. The door is always open, the neighbors pay a call, and Father John, before he's gone, will bless the house and all. How grand it feels to click your heels and join in the fun of the jigs and reels. I'm handing you no blarney, the likes you've never known.
Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is Saturday, December 20th, 2025, 5 days before Christmas, which is pretty wild. They are doing everything they can to, well, I guess they've broken for the season or whatever now, so nothing's going to change until the new year. But I feel like we're on the pathway to brand new censorship laws and other things. And there are other countries that are doing exactly that, ramming censorship through and all the rest right at the last minute before the new year because they can, I guess. Who knows? And so that's problematic in my world. And Minnesota has a lot of Somali fraud, which is very interesting if you ask me. Chris Barber does not have his truck seized. So the court backed down the judge said this is punitive and we don't need to do this. And so they didn't do it. And so that's good news for Chris Barber. I'm glad to report that. Wins are wins. Take them when you can get them, right? Merry Christmas and all that. And what else? Putin is calling out NATO, and I think it's actually quite funny. So we're gonna start with that. And war, and more broadly war in Europe, and what's going on with all of that seems pretty wild and crazy these days. And indeed, it is wild and crazy. I don't know. Usually, politics is boring because it's predictable. And the old proverb applies, you live in interesting times, but if you live in interesting times, that kind of has uncertainty as a byproduct. And so the uncertainty is the problem. And so it's very, very interesting. And that's not always great, right? So lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, we've got to start with war. And Putin shuts down the BBC's Russian threat narrative. No, there will be no new special military operations. If you treat us with respect, as we have tried to respect you, and if you stop playing dirty tricks like NATO's eastward expansion, everything will be just fine. So the EU, Starmer, and everybody else was seen writing down exactly what they need to do to start the war. And so they're going to try that toot to sweet right away. Anton says, Putin to NATO's Secretary General Mark Rutte. What nonsense is he saying? I'd really like to ask him, listen, what are you saying about a war with Russia? You can read, right? Then read the new U.S. national security strategy. The USA is the key player in NATO, the main sponsor of NATO. Russia is not mentioned as an enemy in the new security strategy, but NATO's Security General is getting ready for a war with us. What is that? You can read, can't you? How are you targeting NATO for a war with Russia if the main NATO country does not see us as an adversary and as an enemy? Great question. Great question. It seems very interesting. And I had footage yesterday, and I'm not sure if I saw it yesterday. I'm not sure if I didn't tag it, I don't think. But it was Mark Rutte saying if Russia violates Ukraine, then it will be a big price they'll have to pay, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought, that's funny. Like, he doesn't hold any cards. And Trump is trying to coordinate this peace thing. And Trump is, again, as Putin pointed out, represents the main funding of NATO. So it's really interesting. Like, all these proxy things are very difficult to keep straight in your head. Viktor Orban says, for the first time in the history of the European Union, 24 member states have jointly granted a war loan to a country outside of the Union. This is not a technical detail, but a qualitative shift. The logic of a loan is clear. Whoever lends money wants it back, that money back. In this case, repayment is not tied to economic growth or stabilization, but to military victory. For this money to ever be recovered, Russia would have to be defeated. That is not the logic of peace, but the logic of war. A war loan inevitably makes its financiers' interest in the continuation and escalation of the conflict, because defeat would also mean a financial loss. From this moment on, we are no longer talking merely about political or moral decisions, but about hard financial constraints that push Europe in one direction: war. The Brazilian war logic is therefore intensifying. It's not slowing down, not easing, but becoming institutionalized. The risk today is greater than ever before because the continuation of the war is now coupled with a financial interest. Hungary is deliberately not stepping into this dangerous path. We do not take part in initiatives that make participants interested in prolonging the war. We are not looking for a fast track into war, but for an exit towards peace. This is not isolationism, but strategic sobriety. This is in Hungary's interest and in the long run in Europe's interests as well. So Hungary's calling out Europe and saying, we don't want war. We don't want to loan anybody any money for a war. We don't want anything to do with that. And I agree with that assessment. I don't think Canada should be lending money for wars. I think that's a catastrophic error on our behalf. And we're going to suffer the consequences for it, even though I feel like there's very little we can do to stop it. I still want to lodge my complaint. This is not representative of what the Canadian people want. Here's a Russian guy, or a guy living in Russia. I'm not sure if he's actually Russian. Che says, your update from Moscow. Absolutely no one here wants a war with Europe, the UK, or anywhere else, or anyone else. Meanwhile, no one in the streets of London, Paris, or Berlin wants a war with Russia. So why is a tiny EU NATO elite trying to burn the continent, and who is going to die for them? Yeah, certainly not. So I'll just play a quick minute of this. Here we go.
Hey everybody, just a little update from Moscow. And the one thing I wanted to talk to you guys about in particular is this fanatical, bloodthirsty, insane, completely ludicrous batch of statements. Most recently from the head of the British Armed Forces, suggesting that you got to prepare your children to die in a war against Russia. We had the head of the French army saying the same thing. We've had the Germans say the same thing. This absolute abject lunacy. And meanwhile, on the other side, ordinary British people are coming out in big numbers to say, we have absolutely no intention of fighting Russia. Why would we fight Russia? Russia isn't our enemy. On the streets here of Moscow, if you ask people, like, would they consider going to war with the British or the French or the Germans, you're laughed at. The only people the Russians believe will start any kind of war with Russia is the French, British, and the Germans themselves, because it's a huge distraction mechanism. Surely people realize that at this stage. Even the most delusional Ukrainiacs and Ukro scammers who are probably paid to make posts of this type. We know the heads of the armed forces of these countries.
Okay, so we'll just stop that there for now. So very interesting, right? I get that feeling too. I was talking about how I thought kind of in my gut, and I have nothing to back it up, but in my gut, I feel like a large 70% think the whole position of the West is kind of like pretty crazy, and we should all be looking for peace, not looking for reasons to go to war. We should all be looking for a way to sign the USMCA and make Trump happy, put that milk on the table. Like, stop being lunatics. What are you guys doing? I feel like I'm not angry at Putin. Putin hasn't done anything to me. The people who have done something to me are the people who are still mayors and premiers and prime ministers and things like that, who locked us down, who said, how dare you say no to these vaccines? They're safe and effective. And lo and behold, the conspiracy theorists were right. And so that's weird, right? And nobody's being held accountable. Those are the people who did something to me. I don't have a beef with Putin. I think that Putin largely is calling things as he sees them, and I don't fault him for that. I look at that and say, well, at least he's being honest. That's better than most of our politicians these days. And so it's a very interesting thing that, and in another clip at the beginning of the show that I didn't play the video of, he's talking about how they're trying to magic up a boogeyman, and Russia's the boogeyman, and I think he's right about that too. And so I look at that and I think to myself, you haven't given me a good argument about why I should hate Putin other than, ooh, Putin's so bad. And if you don't agree with me that Putin's bad, you're a Putin apologist and you're bad too. And it's like, oh, okay. And like the same thing about when you push on transgenderism or when you push on any of the sacred cows of leftism these days, anything at all, you just get pushed back and called names, get called racist, get called blah, blah, blah. But there's no good argument. They don't have any good argument, right? If you say, They don't give you an alternative argument. They just call you names to bring you back on board because they don't have a good argument. And that's the point I'm trying to make. Here's Macron and the small group of people who are trying to start this war as best they can. Prime Minister of Canada says, today, Prime Minister Carney spoke with President Macron. The leaders discussed this year's G7 achievement under Canada's leadership and future opportunities and challenges ahead of France's G7 presidency in 26. So I don't even understand how Macron's still a legitimate leader in his own right. His government's collapsed how many times, and nothing seems to have stopped him from continuing to be the leader, right? We're being the leader and positions of power and driving the policy and everything. Le Pen, who, right? She's banned. You can't vote for a Le Pen government in France. That's racist. So the same in Slovakia. You can't vote for that guy. That's racist. We're gonna redo the election tomorrow without this guy again. Okay, do it. Based Hungary says breaking Slovakia exposes the EU migration pact. What kind of solidarity is this? This is blackmail. I will never agree to quotas on migrants. And so a lot of people are predicting the end of the EU, Frexit and Italexit, and there's a whole bunch of other places that are chafing under these regulations that the EU is trying to impose. And they're saying, no, we're not going to do this. Hungary says no, too. We're not going to do this, and we're not going to pay you. So that's all of that is interesting to me. So that's not growing pains. That's fundamental disagreements with the core model, and that's a problem for the EU, really, because if push comes to shove, I don't think people are bleeding yellow and blue, right? Ukrainian and EU colors, EU flag colors, but I don't think if they could stick with Hungary and they live in Hungary, are a lot of people picking up that globalist flag? I don't know. Based Hungary says, Hungary reveals that the European Union is signing deals without approval of member states. This is a coup on the rights of the nations in Europe. So yeah, it's an unelected bureaucracy that is wielding way more power than they should, and they should be brought to heel or dismantled totally. And it feels like the rest of the world is kind of looking at this. Well, Viktor Orban, anyway, is being very, very outspoken about this kind of stuff. Hungary is being very outspoken about this stuff. And as the negative impacts of mass migration are underlined by a lot of people, and they're being underlined by a lot of people, as remigration takes off as a term, then it is going to be interesting to see how it all plays into, well, how the EU weathers that storm, because I think it is a storm. We've got to talk about trade very quickly, and then we'll do our grab bag of governance. Food Professor says Prime Minister Carney said yesterday that he would keep his hands off supply management when responding to President Trump's conditions for the USMCA. He had little choice unless he wanted a full-blown political war with Big Dairy. Yes, a war. All politicians know this. By that, I mean an industry that knows how to protect itself aggressively, how to apply pressure, sharp narratives, and, when necessary, end reputations and careers. They've been doing it for years successfully, while most Canadians have no clue. I've seen it time and again. Scheer and Bernier were just caricatures of what happens when you cross that line. In academia, in politics, everywhere. Most Canadians still don't understand the extent of it. I've said it repeatedly, the only person who can realistically break Canada's dairy stranglehold isn't Canadian. His name was Donald J. Trump, and that's exactly what he intends to do. So, yeah. Yep. There's going to be a movie. There's going to be a movie about Canada's... I hope Greg is the director of this movie, because I feel like it'd be funny. And it'll tell the story of Donald Trump versus the Canadian Dairy Board. It'll be kind of similar in spirit to The Men Who Stare at Goats. Okay, so there you go. Check that out if you've never seen it. It's interesting. It's very interesting. Mark Nixon is talking about trade as well, and he says, explosive. Mark Carney said in French, 100% the negotiations were completely derailed by Doug Ford's attack ad. In English, we don't get that same answer. And so CBC watchers highlighting this. Watch the difference in the answers that Carney gives to the question about Doug Ford's ad being responsible for derailing U.S. trade negotiations. In French, it's absolutely clear. In English, it's word salad. Yeah, it's word salad on purpose. And I think these are different times. Like this is an older interview talking about Doug, like from the period of time when the ad was being blamed and so on and so forth. And it did derail the negotiations then. Anyway, it's one of those things where I think it's Carney is somebody who will often say one thing when something else is true. And so I'm not surprised by any of this behavior. It's exposed. It's exposed every day during the campaign, after the campaign. I will get a deal. A plan is better than no plan. He didn't have a plan. He didn't get the deal. He didn't do any of the things that he promised he was going to do. And now he's acting like a rock star because he didn't do anything and saying, oh, 2025 really built Canada strong, right? We didn't do a damn thing. There wasn't anything built. Bureaucracy, nothing else. So Carney does not say true things most of the time. Moving on, let's do our grab bag of governance. How much time do we have? Globe Politics is reporting Ottawa to shift nearly $1 billion from public service pension fund to general revenue. So that's a lot of money, but I have other questions about this. This fund can't exceed 125%. And so what happens if it exceeds 125%? Good question. It seems like the government gets the money, right? Like last year, Ottawa collected a $1.9 billion non-permitted surplus from the fund. Oh, you bad fund, you. So like this is the pension fund. And they've got all this money in the pension fund, and the government took $1.9 billion last year because that was too much money in this fund. But isn't that our money? Is in the pension fund? Who made this rule that it can't be more than 125% of the fund? Why would you hold a pension fund at 125%? And what do you do with the rest of that money? Is it given to pensioners? Is it dividends or something like that? Or is it just rolled into the coffers like this is being rolled into the coffers? WTF, the government. And it feels like if I invested money for like my retirement and then the bank was like, or the money guy that I'm using was like, okay, so when this fund gets to 125%, yep, I'm going to take the rest. Nope. That's, how about no? When it gets to 125%, I keep that. And when it gets to 150%, I keep that too. And when it gets to 200%, I keep that too. How about that? And what did you want to do with it after the 125%? What? Why do you want to take my money? Give me my money. That would be the conversation. Actually, give me all my money. You don't have any scruples, buddy. I'm going to take my money away from you. You don't have the right to manage my money. What's up with this 125%? So that was why I wanted to show you this. Sure, it's a lot of money, but this is like a yearly thing for them, man. Like, oh, look at that. It hit 125%. Oh, yay. So you're going to take the money again? We're going to take the money again. Oh, man, we should look at changing that rule. Oh, yeah, we should, I guess, eh? Except that if we change that rule, I'd stop getting that $1.9 billion. So we'll look at changing that rule, Mark. But until then, we'll see you next year. Right? Like, oh, yeah, no incentive to change the rules. Right. Yeah, I guess, right? The federal government is shifting nearly $1 billion in surplus funds. It's framed like, don't worry, though, because it was going to hit that 125 and like, oh, they're going to just take the money anyway. It's funny, but it's also terribly sad because nobody has any questions. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't know money. Okay. So maybe there's a reasonable explanation for this, but sometimes I was sitting in a bank and the bank said, I removed all of my money from the bank immediately after this meeting because of what happened. So I wanted a discount. I was paying $11 a month for bank service fees. And it said on their website, if you have 3 services, then you get this waived. Like you don't have to pay the fee. And I was like, great, we don't have to pay the fee. And they were like, oh, sorry, you don't actually qualify. And I was like, okay, like 1, 2, 3. Explain to me how this doesn't fit. And they were like, yeah, it doesn't fit. And I was like, okay. And it was a bullshit excuse. Like we had too many people on our mortgage for the mortgage to qualify, but at least it was an explanation. And I was like, that's bullshit. I said, get your bank manager on the phone, explain to them how big my mortgage is and explain to them that if you don't waive this $11, I'm going to remove all of my money from this bank and move it somewhere else. The mortgage, everything. I said, I'm going to break the mortgage and we're going to move it somewhere else. Please explain that to your boss right now because we're about to leave. And so we did. And then 3 weeks later, after we moved everything, it took me 24 hours to decide. We're in a much better financial situation now. But I moved things over and the bank manager called me and said, we're very sorry. We didn't understand. We'll waive the $11. And I said, oh, it's way too late for that. I said, I've got a whole other mortgage now. I said, I told you it was $11 a month, you lunatics. Like you lost a lot of money. So sometimes my naivete leads to a better outcome anyway. Maybe there's some explanation for this, but I don't think 125% and then they take the rest. What kind of casino are we operating in? That's bonkers. That's crazy. But I don't want to tell you that they're definitely 100% stealing from us, because maybe there's an explanation like, oh, your property doesn't quite fit this promotion. And I was like, that's bullshit. So, okay, maybe there's an explanation, but it's bullshit. It's bullshit. So until new information comes to light, I think this is just naked, clean, preying on people's trust. Anyway, in the latest, the federal government is shifting nearly $1 billion in surplus funds from the Public Service Pension Fund into general revenues, a move that is legally allowed but sharply criticized by unions. It is the latest step in a plan first announced in the November 4th federal budget to use surplus pension funds to offset the cost of a $1.5 billion early retirement incentive as a way of shrinking the size of the public service. Treasury Board of Canada President Shafqat Ali announced the decision Thursday afternoon. He said in a statement that independent actuarial reports show the Public Service Pension Fund remains well managed and sustainable. The Public Service Superannuation Act So all we've got to do is write a superannuation act. Get me my pen. We're writing a superannuation act this afternoon. Write me out. And it states that the size of the pension's funded ratio cannot exceed 125%. The minister said the fund is at 125.5%. Oh, meaning that there is an excess surplus of approximately $0.9 billion as of March 31st, 2025. What do you got to do with that? Well, we're having a party, everyone. The government intends to transfer the non-permitted surplus to the Consolidated Revenue Fund, a central government bank account, where it will be held along with last year's non-permitted surplus. He said discussions with stakeholders about how those funds will be used will be held as appropriate, right? So they're just sitting there. Once the transfer is made, there will no longer be a non-permitted surplus in the fund, the minister said. However, the government announced an early retirement benefit in the budget that said it would be funded from the Public Service Pension Fund. The budget said the incentive would cost $1.5 billion and generate continued savings of $82 million a year. So they're using it to reduce the size of the public purse. Maybe. But what? Last year, Ottawa collected $1.9 billion in non-permitted surplus. Sean O'Reilly, the president for Professional Institute of Public Service Canada, said that in a statement that it is alarming to see the government treat the pension surplus as a piggy bank that it can access at will. Sure is. Super, super alarming, right? Like that's trust-breaking stuff right there, if you ask me. With that, we've got to say goodbye to the stream. If you want the whole show, head over to CanadaPoly.com. If not, that's okay. I'll be around tomorrow. Actually, show news. I can't be doing my show tomorrow because I'm leaving early in the morning, earlier than I could possibly get up and do the show reasonably before I have to go. And I am not going to be back until kitchen table talk time. So we're going to do kitchen table talk, and I may do a regular show tomorrow depending on how juicy the news is, but I may have to just skip it tomorrow because it's Christmas and I don't have any time. Got to have wrapping things to do. I've got like all sorts of stuff to do. So tomorrow we will be doing a kitchen table talk. I should be home right around 1 o'clock, so it should be perfect. I may be a couple minutes late, so if it's a couple minutes late, please forgive me. But no main show tomorrow, so apologies about that. Anyway, with that, if you want the whole show, head over to CanadaPoly.com. If not, that's okay. I'll be around soon. And for everybody else, we will carry on as soon as I kill the stream. Yes. And yes. Done. All right. We will carry on. So here is, this was good for the mainstream. Justice Center is reporting the court has ruled that Chris Barber's truck, Big Red, will not be forfeited. So that's good. A written decision is forthcoming. So good news for Chris Barber. I'm glad that's the outcome that we got, because what happened was just terrible, absolutely terrible. And they didn't have the right to do what they did. And they're bad and they should feel bad. Remember the Hogue Commission? Remember how much of a farce that was? Well, here's the reclaimer, and he says, there's the payback. Carney makes Hogue a deputy minister in new appointment. So super interesting. You did such a good job. So all this insider crony politics is problematic. But it's a two-sided coin. If you have positions to fill, how many people do you know? Like, I feel like people would lobby cronyism at me because maybe I'll choose people who might be in my sphere now to head up positions and things like that because I know them and I trust them or something like that, right? Although I don't know that many people. Like I don't know anybody. I wouldn't have any real. I would say give me the resume, and then I'd throw the best resumes are red flag because the best resumes are aligned with globalism and all that other stuff, right? Like I want to have people who have been able to accomplish tangible things. Have you been able to take a project from inception to completion, and what does it look like now? That's a better measure of like, what are you going to be able to do, right? So I don't know. It's one of those things where cronyism, it can look like cronyism and not be cronyism. And it can just be a circumstance of limited circles and things like that. But at the same time, I think that there is a lot of cronyism in politics. And I think that this is, if not a payoff, compensation or something like that, then a position being a piece being moved into position, right? Like if you're a deputy minister, maybe that gives you more power, and maybe there's even more power coming, right? And maybe further down when there's questions about is this constitutional, is this or is this that, she can say from a position of power, oh yes, I have this history and so on and so forth, and yeah, I don't know. Who knows? But lots of people are saying this is cronyism. Holly Doan says Justice Marie-Josée Hogue becomes 5th Deputy Minister of the Justice Department in 12 years to take charge of the Government of Canada's legal battle to share passwords and news media content without license. So yeah, that's part of the Government of Canada bought one subscription to Blacklocks, and then multiple people use it, and Blacklocks tried to stop them, and then they've been tied up in a legal battle for 12 years about it. And so now Hogue comes in, and I mean, the right thing to do would be to end this and side with one password, one login, one person, right? Like it's not, if you have 10 managers who are all using Blacklocks Reporter as their news, then they should have 10 accounts, right? Really? Shouldn't they? No? So I don't know. It's one of those things, but nobody's going to give a definitive answer.